before we get started, Jordan, I just want to ask, what the hell are you wearing?
Okay, so this shirt is an image of, I don't know the source, but I saw this somewhere on the net, and it's like this old-timey painting, or I guess it's a drawing, of this person who looks to be kind of like in a bed, little troubled, maybe a little fevered, and they're surrounded by a number of gigantic black cats. And it's not clear if these cats are trying to help this person or if they're the cause of this person's problems. So
Are you sure it's not art from the movie Cat People?
I mean, to be honest with you, I tried watching that movie Cat People once upon a time, and I turned it off. So
Okay,
I can't confirm nor deny.
Okay, well, the thing is, I really wasn't interested in what the shirt was. It was more the combination of what you're wearing that's upset me right now.
Okay, so I'm wearing a suit jacket, but that's more to do with our next episode.
Okay, well, here's the problem, Jordan, is that you're wearing a suit jacket over a graphic t-shirt, and that is so awful. Do you not realize how much of a fashion faux pas you're committing right now by doing this? Look, I don't usually give a shit about fashion at all, but that's like the one exception. If I see someone wearing a blazer or a suit jacket over a graphic tee, I'm like, something has gone horribly wrong. You need to stop. I get
you should have
been a bit for the podcast, and I would hope to God you don't go out in public dressed like that, Jordan. For everyone's sake.
I'll tell you what. There are people that did go out in public dressed like this, and they were fans of indie rock music in 2007.
Well, ska was also popular in 2007, so a lot of mistakes were made. Occasionally, some quality pieces of art were produced.
Such as?
Michael Clayton. No, wait, sorry, that's the next episode.
We're talking about Michael Clayton?
The Con by Tegan and Sara.
Mm-hmm. The Con.
Jordan, you remember how we had a conversation about the movies you were recommending? And I was like, are you going to recommend any good movies? And then you did start recommending some good movies. So now I have to ask, are you going to recommend any albums that weren't made by Canadians?
Have I only recommended albums that are Canadian?
Well, in recent memory, I mean, there's Our Lady Peace, and then before that, it's just like a bunch of, static. Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to music that's, not just exclusively Canadian, but I also like to, put some CanCon in there when I can, no pun intended. You see what I did? You see? This is just a little
outfit,
example.
Now the puns. Jordan,
this is just a little example.
Today, and we're
just
example. At the beginning.
Just a minor example of the fun you can have with Canadian music. It's already begun.
I don't know if I describe it as fun, but anyway.
So Tegan and Sara, they are Canadian. They are identical twins.
Which I didn't know until I started watching the documentary about them, which we'll get into later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this podcast is going to kind of, I guess, cover the documentary film Fanatical. The Catfishing of Tegan and Sara.
The Fanatic is the Fred Durst, John Travolta movie.
Yes. That
masterpiece.
Which is also a documentary.
It's also a documentary about Devon Sawa's life.
Yes.
But it's a whole rabbit hole that they didn't even go all the way down. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. It's a very unsatisfying rabbit hole.
Yeah. It's a lot. But we're going to start with the album because Jordan recommended it, and I think at the time, when the first day he recommended it to me, I was just like, I think I put it on and I was like, twee indie bullshit, no thank you. Maybe it was just the mood I was in that day, but then like when we committed to it for the podcast and I listened to it, I was like, I don't know what I was bitching about. This sounds fine. Like I don't know. I think it's good.
It's good. All right,
thanks
you heard
for
it
watching.
here. Yeah.
Bye, everybody. See you next episode. No, but it's good. It's an album. It's got 14 songs on it. You know what's interesting is it's funny that they're identical twins because not only does it make them indistinguishable on the record, like you can't tell if one sister is dubbing over their own voice or if they're doing backup vocals for each other. because they have the same voice, I would assume. But then in the documentary, when they have to cut from one sister to the other in the Talking Heads, every time they have to put up the lower third title that says which one it is so that you can tell them apart.
It's truly hilarious. Like, even when I was watching the documentary, like, I'd look away sometimes and miss that lower third and be like, who is this again?
Yeah.
So you have to kind of like use context clues.
I think if I was looking away, because I was playing Minecraft while I was watching it. Sorry. Like, anytime they'd cut to a new interview, I would make sure I looked over to the other monitor to double check who it was so that I didn't, like, miss context as to, like... Because, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the documentary before we talk about the album, but, like, it is mostly focused on Tegan. So, I mean, she is in a majority of it, but anytime they have to cut to Sara, yeah, they do have to be like, now it's a different person.
Exactly.
Also, it seems like they haven't aged in like 20 years, which is kind of crazy. Like,
yeah,
they've had the same
some sort
appearance.
of secret.
I think they're aliens, is what it really is.
It could be.
Or like synths, some sort of like Westworld robots.
That could very likely be the case. But yeah, it's true. It's weird because like they have been around for a really long time. I guess they started when they were pretty young, so I guess that's also it. Like they're not that old per se, even though they've been like active in the music industry for a pretty long time. They're older than me, but
so
only by a little.
That's pretty fucking old. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my god, here we go.
They're 44.
Here we fucking go.
So
yeah, they're 44. So it's that's not even, you know. Trust me, Greg, when you get to my age, you're going to see people that are in their 40s, and you're going to be like, that's not old. That's not, what was I thinking?
Well, that's how I feel about, like, anyone in their, I'm 29, so anyone younger than me, like, until, like, 23 to 29, I think is, like, you know, I'm like, yeah, that's the age you're supposed to be. But then I see people that are in their 30s, and I'm like, oh, no, that's coming up so soon for me.
Honestly, man, the 30s, it's like the best period of my life. And I think a lot of people that I've talked to agree. Because the 20s is chaotic, man. Like, 20s, you're just a ball of energy, like leftover hormones from your teenage years. And it's just like, it's just a decade of uncertainty, you know? But in the 30s, I think there's a level of just inherent calmness that comes with the acceptance that you've spent a lot of time on the earth. You've observed a lot of things. You've tried things, some successful, some not so much. And you can kind of just sit back and be like, take a more apathetic approach. And honestly, indifference is the biggest virtue in life.
Yeah, I think I'm actually kind of getting to that point. But
good.
Give me another 7 months and we'll know for sure.
Well, there you go. That's
well,
it's right around the
works
bend.
Out that we're talking about this age thing because they were like, you know, late 20s when they made this album. Mm-hmm. This album came out in 2007. They were born in 1980, so that puts them around 26, 27. I mean, they're the same exact age. So the range is like depending on when they wrote it during the year and all that. Mm-hmm. And this does tie into the documentary too, because they specifically bring up this album. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Tegan had a crush on this girl named Lindsay, who I believe is now her wife.
I'm not too sure. Honestly, I don't know too much about them personally outside of like what I learned in that doc. And even though I've been a fan of
I'm still going with this. She meets Lindsay, and then they don't get together, and so she writes her songs on the con about that, about that longing, specifically the last one. Which apparently the story goes when they were filming the music video for, what is that last song called?
Call It Off.
Is that what it is?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, when they were filming the music video for Call It Off, apparently Lindsay was on the set watching it be filmed and realizing it was about her. And then that's what led them to, like, connect. And I'm assuming
finally
they're married
get
now.
Together.
If I'm wrong, you can edit it in right here and say that they're not. They're not. Tegan is married, but not to Lindsay. If you want to know who she's married to, you can Google it like I did. Anyway, back to the episode. This is all to say that one of the personalities that was used to dupe the fans of Tegan and Sara into, like, entering these fake relationships through, like, emails and texting with these catfishers was Lindsay, who is, like, an actual person and not just, you know, like... It's so interesting how that, like, documentary, even though it has no conclusion at all, it does bring up a lot of interesting points about parasocial relationships and, like, fandoms and toxicity within them. I don't know if it did the best job of, like, balancing, like, the Like, but this isn't everyone. We're just saying these people exist, but it's not everyone. They could have done a little bit more legwork on that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we're going to be bringing up the doc quite a bit, so we'll just kind of get it out of the way.
We're just going to weave it in and out, honestly, I think.
The documentary, for those that haven't seen it, is about how there was either one or many people that were basically pretending to be Tegan online and then communicating with the fans. But
they had hacked their management's iCloud accounts and were leaking actual demos and private photos and other information that no one should have access to.
Yeah. So it seemed very it seemed very credible from these fans' perspectives that they were talking to the real Tegan when indeed they weren't. And what I told you, Greg, about this, right when I finished watching the documentary, was I was kind of like, oh shit, that was a side of catfishing that I'd not yet sort of considered. Because it's you read or see stuff, I watch 90 Day Fiancé all the time, and there's catfishing stuff. It seems so fucking obvious most of the time. You're like, how could someone be so goddamn stupid to fall for this? They've never seen this person. They're not having an actual phone conversation with this person. How could you do that? But then for a brief moment when I watched this documentary, I was like, could that happen to me if that was a member of Animal Collective? And, I do think that I'm smarter than that. There would be other things.
You're 37 years old, Jordan. I would hope so.
Exactly. I've got the lived experience.
If you were 14, it'd be a different story.
Exactly. But I think even back then I would maybe put I connect some dots. I'd be like, does it make sense that this thing's happening? But then when I try and message them on this thing, they don't message back. Or I would, I'd be like, okay, how come it's only coming from this one source? And then that would be weird. It would still be sick to get unreleased demos and stuff, but I can only imagine the crippling embarrassment that would come with going to a show after you think that you've been communicating with your idol, and then you show up and you're like, hey, so we were talking about this thing. They're like, who the fuck are you? And then you have to realize in that moment that, oh shit, I was catfished this whole time. I'm such an idiot for falling for that. And oh god, now I'm in front of this person. And I think, leaving with that level of embarrassment would definitely affect, the way that you consume that person's music going forward, because it would be a constant reminder that, that you were so fucking stupid. So
but it also shows the impact on Tegan as a public figure and as an individual human being to have to deal with the other side of that, which is someone's out there pretending to be me. To a lot of people. It's not like it was just a handful of people. It's a widespread problem. They only interviewed a handful of people for the doc.
Yeah.
But I also, another aspect of the whole catfishing thing is that Tegan and Sara are famously a lesbian indie rock band. I don't know. Are they still indie or are they on a major
I'd say they're a pop duo. Yeah.
Pop?
I mean, they've they've had a pretty interesting. Yeah,
did you ever watch Community?
Yeah, that guy. His name's Pop, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pop. Their music, in a very kind of Animal Collective-y way, has been evolving quite a bit throughout the years, and maybe not as drastically as some of the stuff Animal Collective have done. But if you listen to their early first albums and stuff like that, it's totally different. Their voices sound different. Their style's very different, and I feel like they tend to do a kind of 2-album cycle of a certain genre that they're really trying to, work within, and then they kind of move on. So I think that this album, The Con, and then the one that came after that, Sainthood, those were both kind of in that very indie, mainstream indie rock kind of bracket. But then after that, they did a track with Tiesto, and that got super big, and then they kind of used that to redirect themselves into more of a pop centric focus. The last 2 albums kind of returned back to the indie thing a bit more, but it's still kind of different. It's more alt rock, I would say, alt pop. I don't know, but
how is that any different than the Con? The Con is alt rock. It's the very definition of it.
You know what though? There's something a little different about it though, and I think it really comes down to some of the people that they worked with for this album. This album's produced by Chris Walla. You know who Chris Walla is, Greg? Chris Walla was a founding member of Death Cab for Cutie, and he played guitar.
I assume that band was one of those Tame Impala type bands where it's Ben Gibbard's band, and then he just gets everyone else to help him play the songs.
Not at all, man. Like, okay. Chris Walla was such a crucial, like, person and player in Death Cab for Cutie that it is so noticeable that after he left, after Codes and Keys, like, Death Cab's music just started sucking. And it's like one of those amazing things, because I also was under that impression. I was like, oh, I'm sure Ben Gibbard just writes all these songs and these guys just fill in the empty sections with whatever instruments they play. But I'm like, no, shit. If you listen to a Ben Gibbard solo record, boring. If you listen to any other Death Cab, like the last 3 or 4,
minus boring. I was going to say minus the Postal Service, but that's not a solo album. That's like...
No, exactly.
It's like a equal collaboration almost.
Exactly. He needs to collab, that guy, you know? Anyway, Chris Walla, I think, you know, he has a lot of play in the Cons sound, because I think it does have that kind of Death Cab quality to it. And not only that, but the drummer throughout the whole album, Jason Kerr, I think his name is, the drummer from Death Cab for Cutie, to this day.
Oh.
So there is kind of like a sound there that I think fits it more into like what Death Cab sound was, and that's why I'm hesitant to say that it's alt rock more than it is like what indie was in 2007, because I feel like the Death Cab sound really dominated, you know, like that weird pocket of music at that time. So nowadays it's a little different. Death Cab faded into the background a little bit, and
the Postal Service is more popular than Death Cab is today.
Yeah, and there's definitely more of like
that's why they had to do 90s. That duo tour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where they were the openers effectively for the Postal Service.
Can you imagine having to? Well, I guess each album is only like 45 minutes, so you can just do a full set. Did you ever watch the documentary? Do you know who Sparks are? The British band Sparks.
It sounds familiar, but I can't.
You might recognize their song, "This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us." It's like kind of a very quirky, baroque-y, almost like pop hit from like the 80s. They're like a very out there kind of experimental-ish. It's weird. They do strike this weird balance between like... Anyway, you should watch the documentary. It's directed by Edgar Wright, of all people. Yeah, and he's a huge fan of them. So, but they talk about in the documentary how they did this like... Because they did 25 albums over 50 years, and then they did like 2 weeks straight of like... The first night they'd play album 1 and album 2. The second night they'd play album 2 and album 3, and etc. Until they got all the way to the end. And so they literally had to rehearse 25 albums worth of music.
Oh my God.
For like months and months before they did this like 2-week residency.
Wow.
And they just went through their entire discography.
That's crazy.
So I think more bands should do that. Hint.
Yes.
Wink, wink.
Animal Collective.
Maybe. Anyway, so to get back to the Con.
The Con. Okay, well, let's
How did you discover this album, Jordan? Let's go. Okay. That's always a good place to start. To start our 5th beginning of this episode.
Welcome to a musician and a filmmaker.
Oh yeah, we never said that. We never did I said I was gonna. We did our cold open and then we never did an actual intro.
We're talking about what I was
20
wearing.
minutes in now. Mm-hmm. All right, whatever.
I'll tell the story, the tale of me discovering this album. So Tegan and Sara, I grew up in Spain. They weren't like really. I didn't really know about them in Spain. I guess they had a bigger following in Canada. However, towards the end of my time in Spain, I left in 2005, I remember going to a Zara, which I believe is where this jacket's actually from. And when I was in the fitting room, I heard that song... what's it called? Walking Like a Ghost or something. I was walking with the ghost. You know that song?
Did they play it in the documentary? Because otherwise,
probably. That song though, if you listen to it, you'll recognize it. It was like in a bunch of commercials. It's like one of those like.
Is it like their Bohemian Like You equivalent?
Very much. Okay. Like it was all over the place. And I remember thinking like, okay, it's kind of catchy, but I wasn't like immediately drawn to it or anything. However, around that same time is when I was like downloading a lot of music that was
on LimeWire.
You know what? Actually, I was doing the LimeWire thing, but then one of my more savvy friends introduced me to those FTP like file transfer protocol servers,
Oh, okay.
This was
like a soul-seek type of thing.
Maybe kind of like it'd be weird, like
a precursor to that.
A precursor to that, probably. It'd be like they're almost like these like gigantic chat rooms, but like people could like host all of their wares, you know, and then you could just like type it in, and then they would like send you. So like there'd be like a server that would be like indie music or something like that, and so I would download like this is like when I was like just getting into like the Pitchfork kind of stuff, where it was like Decemberists, like Neutral Milk Hotel and the Shins and shit like that, and it was like Tegan and Sara.
Back when Pitchfork was Pitchfork.
Back when Pitchfork was Pitchfork, it's still Pitchfork. It just sucks now.
Well, but, when it got sold to Condé Nast, I mean, it's like a completely different entity now. So that's what I mean.
It looked very different back then as well. It looked very ghetto. It was like basically a GeoCities website.
Oh yeah, I've seen the screen caps of like the Spirit They're Gone, Spirit They Vanished album review, or it might have even been they might have even reviewed the Panda Bear solo album.
I think they did, yeah.
Yeah, back when it was just an email. You signed up for an email like list, basically.
Yeah. So yeah, I was like listening to a lot of recommended artists that I would find there and stuff, and so I would just mass download a bunch of stuff that kind of fell under that indie rock umbrella. And this Tegan and Sara album that I Was Walking with a Ghost song was on, it was called So Jealous, and I listened to that album and I was like, holy shit, this is actually pretty good. And that hit song is probably like the worst song on the album. Like every other song is way better, probably less like marketable, but better in terms of what I wanted to hear in music. So anyway, I didn't even really realize at that point that they were Canadian. I left Spain in 2005, ended up in Ottawa, Canada in 2005 as well, and then that's when I started seeing like, oh fuck, Tegan and Sara are a pretty big deal here in Canada. And so then, I kind of like dug a bit into their back catalog, and I was like, yeah, this is cool or whatever. But I really didn't get into them until The Con came out, and I'm actually talking about the song The Con, and that played on the radio. That was
like the lead single, right?
That was the lead single, and that just instantly I was like, this is pretty much everything that I wanted to hear in a song at that time. It's like it's got like this kind of synth pop thing, but it's also got kind of a bit of an emo like edge to it, and it's got.
I was gonna say this whole album kind of feels like a few steps removed from like the All American Rejects or like My Chemical Romance.
Yeah.
Like there's no screaming in it, but like you definitely feel like if they were just a couple degrees more unhinged, it would kind of go into that power pop, emo, screamo type direction.
100%. And like if you look at the way that like in particular Tegan was dressing back then, it was very like mall emo kind of
hot
like
topic.
Very hot topic looks, like lots of mullets, like lots of like tight clothes and it like embarrassing.
Okay, well, how much of that can you attribute to their sensibilities as emo artists, quote unquote, and how much of it can you attribute to them being lesbians? That's the real question.
That's why it goes so hard with them, because it's both. it's layered.
It's the meeting of the waters.
It is. So anyway, that song came out. I loved it, and I also liked bands like My Chemical Romance.
Before we move on, can I clarify something? Mm. They are sisters. They are both correct. Lesbians.
Correct. Yeah. I know it raises questions, right? Because
how does that happen? Like, okay, you know what? You're born the way you are. I'm not gonna sit here and say that you turn gay at some point in your life. I believe people discover that they are gay from whatever circumstance arises, but to both be the same, have the same face, and have the same orientation, I mean, is nature versus nurture? I honestly... Are they, in fact, synthetic aliens? And they just... It's
a phenomenal case
study.
Whoever
manufactured them chose the lesbian setting for both of them.
I thought
maybe at least like one was lesbian, one was bi. Like, so all this to say, when it gets to the part of the fandom where they're writing fan fiction about them being lesbians with each other, I'm like, well, I mean, you can see how they got there, right? I mean, I'm not insinuating anything about them. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I think that's, it is weird that someone would do that or even think about that. But it's also like, I mean,
It's almost it's a disgustingly
you think about
logical
it for like
conclusion
5 seconds,
to come to,
and obviously, like any rational person would go, well, obviously not. But the people that are into that kink or fetish or whatever you want to call it might not think the same way. So I had to clarify that because
I think it's an age
that to just be a little like, oh, okay. At first, that was surprising more to me than the fact that they were twin sisters. I didn't know that. I thought it would maybe be like, most brother, sister, or like sibling rock bands where like one is a couple years older than the other. But no, they're literally like twins, like identical to the point where you can't tell who's singing,
they're indecipherable,
or who wrote the song, or
yeah. The Con, it was a good song, and then so I ended up buying the album, and I was at the time when I was living in Ottawa, I had a really awesome job. I was working for the city, and I was paid money to kill mosquitoes, and so what I would do is they would hook me up with a bicycle.
Fuck mosquitoes.
Honestly, like I'm a pretty like.
You're a pacifist.
I'm a pacifist, and I have a lot of love for animals, but mosquitoes not so much. I there's few creatures where I'm like kill them all with no remorse, but like fuck mosquitoes. Honestly, like
I mean, they're parasitic. They only exist to serve themselves. I mean, I guess you could argue that their corpses feed slightly bigger bugs, but like. Fuck 'em.
Well, frogs eat them and shit, but like the frogs have options.
Well, frogs don't live in my backyard, Jordan, okay?
No, and they certainly don't live in my house, and there's mosquitoes here, so fuck mosquitoes. Although these days I think the mosquitoes have like a personal vendetta against me because of the masses that I murdered working that job. But that's a different story. Kind of a different story. But to go back to the actual story, so I got paid money. Basically what would happen is they'd put you on a bicycle. You'd ride around the bicycle in the early hours of the morning. You'd start at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Riding around the streets, and all those storm drains that line the sides of the streets, down there is where there's a bunch of stagnant water, and stagnant water is where the mosquito larva is being bred. So you would pour down like pesticides, actually biological larvicides, into the storm drains and then wipe out this larva before they could even become mosquitoes. I actually did this. I'm going to end up going on so many tangents here, but I did it. I worked that job for 2 years. And the first year I worked that, I got like the cops called on me so many times. Because you see what happens, Greg, is in the summer when I'm in the sun, people start to realize that I'm not fully white. And when I was riding around on a bicycle in the early hours of the morning and scooping like these chemicals and then putting them into the storm drains around people's houses. After 9/11, people got a little suspicious and a little scared. And they would call the cops. And it happened multiple times that the cops would show up and be like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, here we go again. Here's all my papers. I work for the city. And it's
we
so
get paid
funny.
by the same people.
Exactly. And then like the people too would like be like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. Like you actually help. Like, can you give me a bag of that chemical that you have? Because we've got like a bunch of mosquitoes growing in our like. I'm like, fuck you.
Off.
Yeah, get your own. You called the cops on me. So that was pretty funny, but
I'm
I
sorry we
thought
lot. You were a terrorist.
Exactly, it was insane.
Which is what the opposite of what Tegan and Sara would say if they ever unmask the Fegans, or the one, whoever.
I'll bet there's multiple Fegans. But anyway, the point is that I spent a lot of time riding around on this bike at weird hours of the day. I'd be like done at like 10 a.m. or whatever, and then like sleep through the rest of the day. But I was listening to this album, The Con, like basically for a good 2 months after it came out, nonstop. Like it's like the only album I listened to. I'd take like fucking portable Discman with me, stick it in the top rack of the bike, and then listen to that album, like just on repeat. It would finish, and then it would just go right back from Call It Off to I Was Married, and the cycle repeated and repeated. And yeah, it just stuck with me, and then I continued to follow Tegan and Sara's musical path, and I think they put out some really great stuff afterwards too, but The Con always, like, I always come back to it, and I'm like, this just to me feels like a really perfect album. Like it's got a lot of variety within it while still staying kind of true to its like kind of foundation in terms of the sound. But yeah, I don't know. I like it a lot. I think it's a great album. I think there's.
Would you say it's like their Merriweather post Pavilion?
To me, yes, but to the world at large, maybe not. I think that like their Merriweather probably came after their Tiesto success. I think their album Heartthrob might be that has the song Closer on it, which is probably their biggest hit at this point. I think that one, that's like a full-on pop album. I think a lot of people probably got into Tegan and Sara at that point. But that's, that's the world at large. For me, I think that this is more akin to like a Sung Tongs for me, like right before they kind of made their big mainstream mark, but when they had enough crossover appeal to have, like your kind of smaller fan base and then your potentially larger fan base also come in, and find something to appreciate in the songs.
Let me ask you something. If you hadn't looked it up, would you be able to tell which sister wrote which song?
Actually, yes, because I've listened to it so many times, and I've also listened to other albums of theirs that there is a difference in their voice. Like Sara has more of a kind of a tighter voice, if that makes sense. Like it's almost more nasally. Whereas
that might be the one that I don't like as much, because there are a few moments on this where I'm just like, eh.
I mean, it's interesting because like I Was Walking with the Ghost song is so, and that whole album actually is so about that kind of like vocal styling that it's interesting that kind of took a bit more of a back seat on this, because it felt like that was their sound a little bit like on the previous album. But that's definitely more of a Sara thing. And I think they can both do it, but I think the songs that are helmed by Sara tend to have that vocal style a lot more in the forefront. And I think Tegan's stuff is more on that emo like side. It's her singing feels a little more intentionally sloppy to kind of, I don't know, maybe it's just a reflection of her influences, because I'm sure she was into like emo music as well. So
I was gonna say there are a few moments on this where it seemed like, guys, I know autotune was new when this came out, but I mean, come on, even just a little bit, just fix a couple of those notes. They didn't have Melodyne, I get it, but
I like it. I like the imperfections, and I think that that's something that I've always liked about the album, is that they weren't afraid to leave some of those imperfections in there or put on silly voices at times. And like, it's one of those things. Like I think we like Animal Collective. I think that there's something very admirable about like A.V. Tare and the fact that he doesn't really seem to give a fuck what he tries with his voice. And like there's just times where it's like I was listening to Defeat this morning, and I was just like, this is such a beautiful song. And then you get him going, stay grounded like the spruce. It goes so low that I was just like, it's borderline cartoony. But, people like you and I that have listened to this band for so long are just like, yes, we want him to do that stuff, because this is what defines the A.V. Tare style. Is he's unhinged. He could sing whatever he wants, and he makes it still sound good. But I could see like if somebody was listening to fucking your cousin, that country guy, and then he starts doing
Bryan.
That.
I call him Zach.
Zach.
His name is Zach, but it's funnier to me to call him Zach.
That is funnier. But if Zach Bryan did something like that in the middle of one of his songs, people would be like, whoa, what are you doing, bud? Right? Or if he sang with like the kind of looseness that Panda Bear sings with live,
with
like people be like
enunciating only like half of the syllables.
Yeah. Or just kind of like, there's times where they're just singing like, and it's just not on key, but the energy is what matters. It's like people that are into mainstream music won't understand that side of it. So that's why I always appreciated the fact that they, have like a British accent for no reason on like your 10 years ago or whatever that song's called. And then like at the end of I think it's Hop a Plane. No, maybe not. It's let me look at the track listing here. There's that one that's like, yeah, Are You 10 Years Ago? They've got like weird accents on that for seemingly no reason except for just,
let's talk about that song, Jordan. Because
it is an outlier.
I recently discovered a song by an artist called Peaches. It's called Fuck the Pain Away.
Fuck the pain away. Fuck the pain away. Fuck the pain away. Fuck the pain away.
You might have heard of it.
Oh yes. That's also Canadian.
It is. And apparently it was a big inspiration for Tom York for 15 Step off of In Rainbows. I think just like that combination of like the, lower range percussion with like the like DJ scratches mixed in there was appealing to him. But anyway, I bring up Fuck the Pain Away not only because it's a hilarious song, but that like now in that song, I'm going to play a sample of it right now, but there's like the sample of the cymbal that she hits like over and over again on the drum machine in that song. And so now whenever I hear that cymbal in any other song, or even just like, what did she use? Like a 909 on that song or an 808? I don't know what drum machine she used, but like it's a very Sounds recognizable, like, those, like basic drum machine. And so now when I hear that anywhere, I'm just... but that's this song specifically, it gets about 30 seconds in, and I was just like, is this going to turn into Fuck the Pain Away? Because it has almost sort of like a very similar, like, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Trajectory. And it's like... But it's also like, it doesn't sit there and spam the cymbal. It like maybe does it once every like 16 bars. So it's just subtle enough to where like that was the first thing that entered my head when I heard the song. I was like, That's true. Is this a double speed Fuck the Pain Away?
I mean, like, it's something I've actually never thought about while listening to that song, but that song has always felt...
When we talk about variety on the album, that's like literally the only one that stands out instrumentally. Because everything else has like the pretty standard, like, sort of, I don't know if you want to call it smooth, but like sort of clean guitar tones. There's no real like fuzz or distortion or anything. There's some square synths in there. There's a few electronic flourishes, but not like it really is just like more your basic guitar, bass, drums, piano, singer setup as far as like the core of their instrumentation. And I think that being a running theme throughout the whole album is maybe what made me not get into it as much, because we've talked about it many times before, I like to have a diversity of sounds on an album, and it can work when you just pick one sound and stick to it for just that album, but in this case it felt like they could have gone a little bit further with the non-standard, 4-piece setup stuff, and I would have appreciated it more. But I also think the spotlight is not on the production. The spotlight is on their voices and the lyrics. So that's really what takes precedence. And like the Church's album we reviewed, this album is mixed really well. I would not fix anything about how it was finished, except maybe cut down some of the songs. Like, I think there are a couple that you could do without on this album. I don't think there needed to be 14 songs. That being said, 37 minutes... Gets a thumbs up from me. That's a good album length right there.
It's a good album length, yeah.
My last point on this like little tangent is, I feel like obviously you take inspiration from a lot of musicians that you listen to, but I think I could definitely notice some stuff that's on this album that I've heard in your music that it almost seems like a direct inspiration, or maybe it's a subconscious thing or what have you. But there are definitely a few, like, I don't know what song it's on, but there's like one part where everything just kind of slows down and the only guitar is just like an open chord that like sort of drifts off. I'm like, that's something Jordan would do.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, I think that a lot of the time it is a bit like of a subconscious thing when I'm making music, but then like later I'll kind of listen to a song of mine and be like, oh fuck, that's totally like that song, or like that makes sense because I've been listening to that or whatever. But I definitely would say that Tegan and Sara's music have been an influence on my own songwriting. Definitely that album. Like, I think that it's just, they're really strong. And that's the thing too, is I like the fact that none of the songs overstay their welcome. Like, 14 songs is a lot, but like some of the songs are only like a minute long, like there's songs.
I did appreciate that this does seem like an album where they know exactly how long every song needs to be without, like you said, overstaying its welcome. We're not going to do a track by track, but I do want to talk about my favorite track, which was the second single, Back in Your Head. That's a great song. And to kind of continue on the thread we were just coming from about inspiration, I had only listened to the album twice, and I was falling asleep last night after finishing the movie. And that piano riff popped into my head. And for like a few solid minutes, I was like, wait, is that from a demo I wrote on my little synthesizer and saved and then forgot about? Because that sounds a lot like just like the rhythm of like the like heavy drum hits and that like basic piano riff. That sounds exactly like something I would whip up together in like 5 minutes and then forget about and come back to and be like, oh. That's a damn good single.
It is.
I enjoy it. And that fact that it's a Sara song is also a plus. It's interesting how yeah, you really can't tell unless you look it up. I mean, at least like for a first time.
Yeah. The more you listen to it, the more you can, kind of get a sense of who, like those subtleties of their voice and stuff like that. But yeah, it is definitely when it comes to like the backing vocals, I can't tell the difference because I know that they try and mimic each other's style to do those backing vocals. So it's like, it's pretty much impossible to know, but it is a split. Like there is 7 Tegan songs and there's 7 Sara songs on this album, even though it's not like a direct trade-off, like one track. It does it for the most part, but then there's some that they do group a couple of them together. But I think that's just in the benefit of the flow of the track list, and it does flow pretty good. So,
well, that's one of the benefits of being born minutes apart, is that everything you do is just so similar that it wouldn't be like, you can't tell, and that's maybe like a positive. They are there. It's not Tegan and Sara, it's Tegan and Sara.
Yeah, they're one. Yeah,
they are a cohesive unit. So it's like, what I like is the opener. It's 92 seconds long, but it almost sets like a different expectation of what the album's gonna be until the second song kicks in.
Yeah,
like it almost feels like a I don't know, a little bit more twee and indie in like a songbooky way, like a Vampire Weekend opener almost. But no, I don't know. Maybe that's not the best comparison, but you know what I mean. Like it definitely does not. It's a lot more stripped down and like
it feels a bit more somber than like, because I think the album has some pretty big pop numbers on it. I think that it feels like a somber opening. Like I remember hearing the single The Con and then getting the album and then hearing I Was Married. I was like, oh, what? What am I in for here? What's this going to be? And then hearing like Relief Next to Me in between I Was Married and The Con, I was like, what the fuck? And, so, I mean, like you said, they do use like a kind of grounded palette for the album, but at the same time, like I think that there is enough variation, because if you take like I Was Married, Relief Next to Me, and The Con as 3 songs that are back to back to start the album off, I mean, those are some pretty different sounding songs.
Right. The structure, I think, is what helps set these songs apart. Although I do think that they rely a little too much on the repetition of lyrics if they maybe like it is just kind of like an A and B section kind of to their songs, which is fine. It's not like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, like churches. But yeah, I feel like if maybe they had some sort of like, maybe a bridge or two would have helped in diversifying it even more. But it doesn't, like, it's not like on what is it, Slow Motion by Panda Bear, where he says counting like 32 times in a row. It's not like that extreme, but it's just enough to where it's like when you're reading through the lyrics, you really only have to read like the verses, and then you're like, oh, I've pretty much read all the lyrics in this song, because it's like they just take one lyric and repeat it again. It's not like Rise Against the Machine, Killing in the Name of. Is that what their brand is? Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm thinking of Terminator 3.
That's actually probably what I mixed up. That'll be our next movie, actually, next month. No, but yeah, I don't know. I don't dislike it. I think it's a perfectly good album, but I think there are a few things about it, like how Lauren Mayberry's voice didn't really work for you with Churches. How their voices, like, I don't think that they're bad singers at all. And in fact, I think the imperfections are so minor that, like, it's really only if you're, like, listening for it that maybe you hear it. But I don't necessarily think that it's, like, it wouldn't be something I would just throw on, It maybe, like, if the piano riff from Back in Your Head got stuck in my head, ironically, I would probably play it. But otherwise, like, I can be like, yes, that is good. Anyway, back to what I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. I mean, it's good to recognize it. But, if you really want to unlock the absolute potential of this album, try listening to it while killing mosquitoes. That's...
Okay.
Yeah, that's the perfect backdrop for this album.
Or this album coming up on summer in Texas, so I'll have ample opportunity. I fucking ankles got bit to hell last night.
God, I hate those things. Hate them. You heard it here. I hate mosquitoes. I love
we're not very hateful people, but when it comes to parasitic insects,
when it comes to mosquitoes and cockroaches, all my humanity goes out the window.
I've never had a cockroach problem in my life.
It's good.
I've lucked out.
I hope it stays that way for you. I hope it stays that way.
I mostly see June bugs, and they don't really come inside. They're a little gross, but like, they don't reproduce nearly as fast.
That's true. I would say that the most disgusting insect on the planet is a cockroach. I would take any other one before I take a cockroach.
Okay, so now that we've basically gone through the album, and do we really have anything else to say? It's kind of just like thematically, it's really like what? It's like a half breakup album, because I think Sara was going through a breakup and other personal stuff, and Tegan had that whole longing for a relationship and all of that. So I mean, it's not like a thematically dense album. It's very surface level in terms of what it's trying to convey.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the documentary then, because there's more to talk about. And
yes,
it was a thing. So this is actually a pretty recent documentary. It came out last year. Not even a year. It was like November. It came out on Hulu. But this issue goes back to like what? Before this album, right?
Yeah.
Like the first vegan victim.
Yeah, because they were talking about this happening while they were writing this album. Right?
MySpace.
So, yeah.
MySpace was how it all started. That's how, that dates.
That's how old it is, yeah.
We'll talk with Michael Clayton about how that is otherwise dated. Like, you wouldn't be able to really pin this down unless you knew like the contemporary sound of the other albums in its sphere, like The Con in 2007. But anyway, the documentary it goes back to like, because they talk about how, they were one of the first bands, or like at least they sort of like early in their career hopped on the rising trend of internet communities for fan bases of bands, growing as the internet was growing back when we didn't know how good we had it. And then email was really how it all went down, which is, sounds like nonsense to you and I now. Like, just add me on Snapbook or whatever and instant message me instead of, writing letters electronically and then waiting for a response.
But you know what, though? That is also a reason why it was so possible for that to happen, right? Because, like, when I was a kid and, like, the internet, came out and shit, and at least in a sort of more, consumer-based level, like, I remember this chat software called ICQ. Yeah, that was it. And, a lot of people that are my age will be like, oh, fuck, yeah, that rings a bell now. But it was like,
your fellow AARP members?
It was in such a brief moment in history that, it's basically forgotten. However, what I will never forget is when I was a kid, I remember I was at my family home, and we were going on ICQ, and I was showing my friends, and I was like, this is so cool. You can just talk to anybody in the world. Like, you just type things and you can like add people. And so we were listening to The Offspring at the time. And I remember looking up, we're like, man, I wonder if the members of The Offspring have ICQ and are on it. So we type in Dexter Holland, the singer of The Offspring. And then this little fucking name just pops up, Dexter Holland. And it says, lives in, wherever in the States or something. I imagine is California or something. And this is how fucking stupid we were as kids. We're like, it must be him. Because like,
there's no one else on earth that has that name.
And he lives in California. and he's actually...
Barely anyone lives in California, as we all know.
Has to be him. 100%. There's no way it's somebody else with the same name who lives in the place. It's no way it's somebody else who's a fan of The Offspring who's just put this information on there.
Yeah.
There's no way. And I remember we like clicked on it. We were, oh my God, we're such big fans of your music. Just go, thanks. Oh my God, we just talked to Dexter Holland from The Offspring. So, all that to say that I get it, because back then you didn't really know the full capabilities of the internet. So it's like, Yeah, you
do.
do.
It's like that brain meme from Arthur the Aardvark, the kids cartoon. Or no, it's Buster, isn't it? The rabbit friend.
Oh, yeah.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
Exactly. We were all as naive as that rabbit.
They should have referenced that meme in the original Catfish documentary with Nev Schulman. Did you ever see Catfish? 2009? No. Really? It's a cultural moment. It's like Blackfish or Super Size Me. Everyone saw it. It's one of those popular documentaries.
Maybe
and you know that because when you go to like the handful of physical media stores that still exist, and you go to their Blu-ray nonfiction section, invariably there's a fucking copy of Catfish for $10, and I'm like, no, it's a dumbass movie.
I may have torrented it back in 2009. That was a dark year, so I don't know. I can't remember.
I mean, if you're out here watching 90 Day Fiancé, I feel like you're not that far removed from getting into the MTV series Catfish.
Hell yeah, I've seen a couple episodes of that. That's great stuff.
I think it's still going, which is crazy. They're on like year 14 or something.
It's like shows like that in 90 Day Fiancé will never end. It's the same fucking shit
because they're dirt cheap to shoot, and you can shoot them in like a week.
And this stuff's gonna happen regardless. It's not like you just have to show up with cameras.
So the documentary really just kind of tries to investigate the culprit or culprits behind this widespread deception, and it doesn't really succeed.
It doesn't succeed. It points the finger at one person that feels just very sloppy in terms of like investigative, direction or anything like that.
Well, what was funny is that like there was one person who was in their sphere that was being impersonated too. And like it was just like this. It wasn't just Tegan being impersonated. There were other people in their lives that this person was like sending emails from to try and like fill out the validity of this scam. That you are in fact talking to the real person, and you're talking to their associates too. And she talks about like getting blowback from this whole thing from the fans, finding out that she was involved, even though she did nothing. She just existed and then was thrust into this situation against her will. So the fact that like she was confused about the whole thing and like not exactly emotionally secure with the whole thing led to her hiring her own private investigator who was like, oh, we've concluded that it really was Tegan that was sending these emails. I'm like, so you just paid someone to tell you what you wanted to hear? Like that? Why are we going to private investigators? Like, why not the FBI? And obviously the answer is that the FBI doesn't care unless someone steals $250,000 or kills someone. Those are like the two base level things for them to get involved in cybercrime. Otherwise, they don't give a shit. So you can sit there and call a guy or call anyone any word you want ever. And as long as you live in one of these free speech countries, no one gives a shit. Okay?
No one gives a shit.
No one gives a shit about phishing scams or obviously identity theft is its own thing. That it has its own, I'm assuming. But again, I think the world is also just a giant fucking mess and no one knows what they're doing. So really, I think we just like to live under the assumption and the delusion that, of course, every crime that exists out there, there is a, some sort of justice department that is responsible for enforcing it. And but most of the time, no one cares. Like really, if this vegan person was like, I'm going to fucking kill you, or if you don't do what I say or any of this, it would obviously have to involve the police. But really, it just kind of results in like, it's just like a deception. Like some teenage kids got their feelings hurt because they thought they were friends with their idol, but then it turns out they weren't. And then, of course, you have to deal with the stigma of being a victim of this. And like, how could you not know better? But it's like, you can always point the finger at any victim, but that doesn't necessarily... That just makes you feel better about yourself, that you think, oh, I would never fall for this. And of course I watch all of these like cult documentaries and scams and whatnot and think the same thing. But, you put anyone in any scenario, I think most people are trusting enough to strangers that they just automatically assume that everything is kosher. I think most people are optimistic and not too cynical to at least have sort of a base level trust of anyone that they come into touch with. And so when you take advantage of that on top of the fact that they are supposed fans of this artist you're pretending to be, it's just a really bad combination, and it's going to lead to a lot of emotional turmoil and, you know, all this other stuff that Tegan and Sara can't seem to do anything about. And I'm not saying that they can and that they're not, that there is a thing that they're not doing that could prevent this, but it's so fucking messy. And again, I can't really blame the filmmakers for not being able to have a conclusion and be like, this is who it is. We found him. Go get him. Because if they did, they would go to the cops, you know?
Yeah.
It really, but it also, yeah, like just going back to the whole like organization of it, like they're just hiring private investigators. It's like, well, apparently they're not very good at their fucking jobs, or you couldn't pay, you know, good enough PIs to actually find anything substantial instead of just like hearsay amongst the fan community. Like the person that they do actually get on the phone to interview, because they try to get them in person, and then it's this whole thing where they don't feel like they can trust them, and then they just end up getting on Zoom, but they don't show their face. But Tegan is on Zoom with the director of the movie, and so it's like the three of them on the call. And this person is like, the only reason that they're involved is because at some point or another they harassed other people in the fan base, but they weren't pretending to be Tegan, as far as I know. I think as how they explained it in the documentary, is just like they were the one that wrote that weird like twincest fan fiction about the two of them. Or something like that.
They were shit talking them basically after they had been catfished by well, we've mentioned the name Fegan, but people who haven't seen it.
Oh, okay, so that's right. They were a victim as well.
Yeah. Fegan is the name that they gave the catfisher because it's fake Tegan, so Fegan.
Well, it also doesn't help that this person that they contact goes under the pseudonym Tara, which is just a combination of Tegan and Sara. So I actually started getting confused after a minute. I'm like, wait, Tegan, Sara, Tara.
Yeah.
Help me here. What's going on? I know how Tegan and Sara feel. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they contact her, and I think it's one of those things because, like, you know, I felt like you're right. Like, you know, having actual police involvement would only go so far because nobody's died or there hasn't been, you know, some amount of money, you know, at the core of this whole thing. But I do think that the fact that Tegan's computer was hacked, and like personal like demos and personal photos and stuff like that, especially like demos that were probably, you know, had some sort of licensing agreement with their record label and stuff like that. Surely somewhere in there lies an actual, you know, police, you know, worthy investigation. I mean,
copyright infringement is its own thing. You kind of have to have a lot more like definitive proof when it comes to like, that's like why so many. Remember when that kid got sued by the studio behind the Hurt Locker for torrenting because they thought that would be a way to enforce pirating, and it instead just ended up doing the complete opposite. It made everyone go, fuck you, we're going to do it even more, and now we all have VPNs, so you can't find out who any of us are.
Yeah, are you just saying because like it's it'd be so hard ultimately at the end to find out who's like stealing these demos and stuff like that?
Exactly. And so, you know, there's only so much the police can do in general, because I mean, fuck the police, but also like, you know, there's so like when it comes to the digital stuff, you really do need like a cybersecurity expert or like someone who actually knows what they're doing. And it doesn't seem like anyone that was involved with this documentary had any of those connections.
No,
it seemed like they should have just called it Grasping at Straws, the catfishing of Tara, Tegan and Tara.
Grasping at straws. That's 100% what it is. Like, I felt like it was so haphazardly done, this investigation. It was just like, let's see who we can talk to, and maybe if we accuse them, they'll just give up the jig.
Let's go back to that Tara call, because the dynamic of that call is all over it's a roller coaster. Which, like, I guess that's how you end your movie if you don't have an actual ending, because that's, like, the most anything that actually happened while you were recording. So it starts with them, like, straight up accusing this person of being the Fegan, or one of them, that is deceiving these fans and stealing their identity and all this. But then, like, it's very evident that that isn't the case from their behavior. But it also does then, like, sort of, it never once do they say, oh, I'm sorry for accusing you of something you didn't do. That never once gets said by either of them. Like, maybe say that. so that you can be on this person a better, have a better trust with this person if you're going to continue to ask them about it from, okay, well, we're all victims now. Let's continue to try and go down this. But then it like turns in another way where it's like, if I were this person, I would say, fuck you and hang up anyway after that. But then they stay on the line, and then it gets to the point where, like, Tegan is talking about how it affects her, or, like, the Tara starts going off on some rant about how, like, it shouldn't even matter anyway. Like, how does it even affect you? And she's like, the fuck are you talking about? How could it not affect me? I'm like, yeah, it's her fucking identity that's being stolen. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, that is really funny.
It's just like, so it's like, number one, you should not be talking to this person anyway. And number two, why are you putting them on blast like this? Like, this didn't go the way you wanted it to. Don't put it in the movie. You didn't learn anything from this interview. It was a giant waste of everyone's time. Like, you could have spent your time and money actually investigating it, like, more properly. But look, I understand coming at it from Tegan and Sara's perspective. They're Canadian, first of all, so they're already, cuckoo. But no, they're coming at it from the perspective that they're like musicians, that that's who they are. They're not terminally online people that know every in and out about how to, keep, especially as public figures, to keep sensitive information about you from being accessed by bad actors. So, like, I get why they wouldn't immediately be like, oh, I'm being cyber hacked and impersonated. Let me call so-and-so, because I've had their contact information for years, and this is the perfect opportunity. Like, obviously, they're not going to just be, like, perfect about it. And they are Canadian, so what can the FBI really do for them? Like, they can maybe persecute them if Fegan is American, but if they're Canadian, then they're kind of fucked. I mean, does Canada have the CFBI, the Canadian Federal
FBI.
Bureau of Investigation?
Yeah, there is. It's CSIS or something.
Oh, that's right. Because I think they were investigating Luca Magnotta. Shout out to Don't Fuck with Cats on Netflix. Much harder documentary to watch, but it actually does have a conclusion. They do actually catch the guy. But
maybe he was vegan as well.
I mean, you never know, right? That actually, it does kind of cross over with this, because there is, like, an aspect of, like, a false identity over the internet in that one. So, but that was because he wanted to hide his identity so he could post videos of him murdering cats, but, and then a person. So that's when that's when the police got involved.
Yeah, it's funny. You know what I also really didn't like about the documentary, the Tegan and Sara documentary, is there was that friend who was sort of focused on a little more than the other people, who like was a fellow musician, I think, from Vancouver, was like in the scene but never. Yeah, she never really made it big or anything.
That's who I was talking about, that hired the private investigator.
Right. Yeah. And, like, I think her outlook was just kind of cringy the whole time, because it was, like, pretty clear that she was embarrassed about what had happened to her, because, like, she was getting catfished by the Fegan person saying that they were, like, into her and stuff like that. So she was conjuring, like, this whole kind of future romance that was, more along the lines of, like, a regular catfish sort of situation. And then, had to find out the hard way that she was talking to an imposter. And I think that, like, for
and then
her
people started, like, she became notable within the, like, Toronto music scene or whatever as that person.
But then she became, like, a full-on hater of Tegan in particular, and was like, this has ruined my life, and how come you're not reaching out to me and stuff. And I was like, get the fuck out of here, man. Like,
because
someone steals your identity
and has a whole career and life that doesn't, like, you're not the only person who is affected by this. If she could reach out to everyone, it seems like she would. She does seem like that remorseful of a person.
And that's the thing too, is in the end,
or even though she has nothing to be remorseful over, other than the fact
she's
that
not,
she was, it's her public image that's being taken advantage of.
Exactly. And it is a testament to, the kind of person that Tegan is, when you see that in the end where JT and her have that conversation. And I think, like, the biggest takeaway from the doc is that Tegan seems like a genuinely good person. But
but maybe could have taken a little bit of coaching on what exactly the best way that you can respond to this. Like, I understand wanting to be genuine and how you approach it and how you represent yourself and your reaction to the situation. But I also think that there are some parts of it where it's like, okay, if you're trying to walk this line between like not all fans and like focusing on these people, you really need to, walk on eggshells a little bit lighter, because it does seem like there is like this weird like little tangent in the movie where they go off on toxic fandom, and I'm like, okay, you really got to do a better job about like specifying who you're talking about, because it starts casting a really wide net. Especially, I mean, it doesn't help that like, didn't they open for Taylor Swift at one point or another, or they still are? Like,
that could have happened at some point. Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Point being, they're pretty mainstream in terms of their exposure to like these younger audiences. And so when they get into like stan culture, that was great. I loved how like they felt like they had to explain to the 14-year-old girls what Stan by Eminem was.
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
and they're like, many people really don't know that Stan comes from stalker plus fan from the Eminem song. I'm like,
it's like, who doesn't know that?
Well, anyone who is like not a teenager would probably know that. I mean, even if you don't,
even if you're a teenager,
I feel like Eminem is one of like the handful. Stan is one of the handful of Eminem songs you've probably heard as you grew up. It just, even like if you didn't know it was him, totally. Like you've probably heard that chorus somewhere, which isn't even from. You took it from a different song, and it's not even a chorus; it's a verse from the Dido song. But anyway,
no, it's
all
funny.
This to say that it does seem like a little patronizing, that documentary, where they're like. Well, we do have to address the Tegan and Sara fan base primarily, because this is who it most directly affects. That being said, I feel like they could have done a better job at like a little bit of a public service thing where they say, okay, if you are a Tegan and Sara fan, if everything you've seen so far hasn't clued you in to be careful, here's what to look out for.
Yeah.
Like they didn't seem to be bothered with that. It was like, we're at this point, all these people have been deceived. We want to find out who it is. It's like, well, there are a lot of different angles you need to approach this from if you really want to squash this bug. If you want to kill this all these mosquitoes that are sucking the blood out of your fans emotionally.
Oh, I love it.
You gotta spray your chemicals down
the
more.
Biological larvicide down the storm drain.
You need to be more methodical about which storm drains you spray your larvicide down. Because you'll end up accusing the wrong person, which they do, and then they don't really seem to like, are bad. They don't seem to apologize or be like, oh, we did something wrong here.
Which is what happened to me when they accused me of being a terrorist. This all ties in.
Exactly. And so they just go, oh, okay, well, that didn't work. Bye. Like, that's the movie. It's just like, guys... The Jinx didn't just get a year and a half through and be like, well, we can't find out the answer. All right. Upload. Like, you need to keep going. Like, this, I understand the purpose of a documentary as a public service announcement in a way, being like, the fact that this does exist brings this issue to light for more than just people who know about the band and their fan base in general. Like, it brings it to the eyes of the general public. People like me who don't know anything about this until your podcast mate says he wants to do an episode on one of their albums, and you go down this rabbit hole yourself. I do think that it could have been more effective. The point I'm trying to make is like, this issue's been going on for almost 20 years. So whoever this is has got to be like middle-aged at this point. Or maybe your age. So yes, middle-aged. But like, you are making this, if you're framing this around it being an investigation into trying to find who it is, don't tip your hand before you find out who it is. Like this is when I watched this and I was texting you after the movie. I think I said, I was like, if I was one of the Fegans and I saw this documentary, I'd be like, I'm good. I don't have to change anything. I don't need to be more secure in how I do this. I don't need to stop.
Yeah, they're never going to catch me.
I can keep doing this because apparently they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Which, you know what? I'm not going to blame them for not knowing what they're doing, because this isn't who they are. They're musicians. No. They're just their primary purpose in life is to write music and then sell it to a label and then perform it and make money so that they can live comfortably and, you know, their family and all that. That's who they are. They're not people that are online all day, every day and are, you know, constantly engaged in the latest discourse on Twitter. And it's like, the only people to blame in this are the perpetrators. But I also want to place some blame on the filmmaker for her sloppy work in bringing this issue to light. Like, it is important that she made the movie, and it is a good thing. It is ultimately a net positive that the movie exists, because maybe people will take what was given to them with the information in this documentary and do some of their own investigating and actually get some goddamn conclusive evidence that isn't all hearsay or like maybe, you know, like you can't deal with maybe if we're talking about criminal prosecution, because if they do find who this is, they have all this evidence against them. And if they can like electronically tie it back to them, whoever it is going to go to prison, you know, like, but it's just such a widespread thing. There's so many victims, and we can't even tell if it's one person or multiple that's behind it. They couldn't even fucking tell. They invented a whole fake person from like Maine who, or who, what was it, like Matt? Just some guy named Matt, and then it just turned out that was a complete like red or what do you call it?
Red herring,
yeah, red herring. So, guys, the movie should not be trying to figure it out as it goes along. You know, like you need to know what you're doing before you sit down to edit. And it's just
it's true. It did.
There's a reason the Jinx season 2 came out 9 years later instead of a year later, which they easily could have done, but they decided not to because they wanted.
Well, whoever this documentarian is no Andrew Jarecki, that's for sure.
No.
But it did feel extremely sloppy, and it did feel an awful lot like just a very uninformed kind of shot in the dark, where it was like, I imagine that the documentarian is, you know, a personal friend. And she was just like, you know what? This is really annoying that this has happened to you. Maybe we can both benefit if I make a documentary and sell it to Hulu. And maybe, just maybe, we might find the culprit at the same time. And it's just like, okay, well, do you like have any of the tools at your disposal to actually solve this thing? No,
well,
I'm just gonna like call...
I Googled private investigator, and the first thing that came up, I hired him immediately. Because there's no way that they would half-ass anything that they do for $1.
It's insane. But you know what, though? Despite the overall kind of, you know, just letdown that was that documentary, I think that there was like a couple of takeaways, like you said, you know, for people that maybe didn't like think about that aspect of catfishing. There's a new thing to be aware of, you know, that you can potentially thwart by having this knowledge in your brain. But also, I mean, you know, what kind of irked me is that, you know, I was like, for the people or the person who is vegan, the people that would try and do a catfishing scam like this on fans of an artist or a band or anything like that, I'm like, you know, it's a shame. It's a shame, because at the end of the day, like, you know, what do musicians do, right? Like you said, it's not really in their wheelhouse to be like, well, we're going to launch this like full-on investigation and we're going to contact the police. It's not really their thing. So really the only course of action they can take is to not hang out with the fans, which is shitty for
which is what they had to do. They were big on meet and greets, and there was no VIP buffers or security detail or really anything before all this catfishing started. And now that is an aspect of the documentary where it was like they were very public facing, but they had to stop doing that against their will. It wasn't because they wanted it wasn't because they were like, well, fuck these fans, they're all crazy. No, it was just like they couldn't trust anyone, because like even the people in their inner circle were being impersonated, and they didn't know what was real and what wasn't. So that was one of the correct steps that they took to try and mitigate the disaster that was happening.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine
still happening.
Like, you know, Animal Collective, we're so thankful that that's the kind of band that, you know, really doesn't have that barrier between the fans, where it's like, if you go to an Animal Collective show or any of the solo shows, there's like a pretty much 99 to 100% chance if you want to meet these guys, you can. If you just wait outside, they'll come out. And even people that might seem like, you know, a little bit maybe against the idea of doing it. Like Noah seems to, like, he tends to give that vibe. If you see him in person, he's totally willing to sign as many fucking albums as you bring, answer any questions, whether it's like, you know, secretive or not. Like they're so open, and it makes me feel like that sense of empathy when it's not like I'm on that level when it comes to Tegan and Sara, but like if Panda Bear and Avi Tear and Deacon and Geologist said, hey, fuck, somebody's impersonating us, and now we're no longer ever going to do that, I would be like, fuck, this one guy or whoever, you know, many people ruined it for the rest of us that, you know, legitimately enjoy this music and want that experience. So it did hit a bit of a chord when I kind of saw that side of it, and I was like, fuck, yeah, this does have like a bit of a ripple effect where it is pretty annoying for both parties here that want to have that kind of synergy in real time with the artist and the fan, you know?
Right. I think what makes the situation ultimately the most, like, dreadful to think about is the fact that they didn't do anything to deserve it. Mm-hmm. There are people on the internet who get harassed on a daily basis who you can actually analyze their behavior and go, oh, they're feeding the fire. They're not, if they wanted to stop being harassed, they would just log off. Like, there's a difference between being a public figure and not being able to log off, or like I've seen people whose lives and careers have been ruined by their own behavior and replying to the trolls or whatever, what have you, feeding the fire of the harassment. But it's not like Tegan and Sara ever did that. You know, if anything, they almost were a little bit at fault by not even acknowledging it in the way that they should have. They should have been more open about the fact that, hey, someone's stealing our identity. But I think maybe they were like considering the outcome of that. Well, it's like, well, then are all these fans going to start turning on each other, and then our fan base is going to implode because everyone's thinking that you know, everyone's pointing fingers at all these false criminal. It's a fucking mess. Just like the documentary that trying to explain it, it's a fucking mess.
Yeah, and again, it's not really their thing, right? Like, they want to keep playing songs for the fans, and they want to have that opportunity to connect with the fan base. It's not like, you know, like, I mean, from my perspective, like, if I was in their shoes, I would be like, I don't know where to really start with this. Like, I would have to go outside and hire people and be like, can you figure out what to do with this? And then they'd probably be like, okay, well, while we're figuring that out, in the meantime, try to limit like your communication with fans. They'd be like, well, fuck, that's like what we do, though, you know? So it's a tricky situation, and I definitely, there's no fault at all on Tegan and Sara's
I just think no, but I also think there's a little bit of like there could have been more thought put towards it. Like, the second that James Gunn finds out that someone is impersonating him on Instagram through the DMs, he immediately gets on Twitter. He's like, that shit ain't me. Don't fucking fall for it. And there are plenty of celebrities that do that within like 24 hours of it happening. Mm-hmm. But over almost 20 years, they never once said, hey, everyone, fucking watch out, before this documentary came out. That's the impression I get from what, I mean, it does seem like they directly say that happened. Like, they just, or it didn't happen. And I feel like they have a little bit more of a responsibility as the people in the middle of this to do that, even if they didn't do anything to deserve it and they didn't bring it on themselves. It's the situation they're in, and I guess by the documentary existing, they did eventually do that. But it's also like, I don't want to say too little too late, but it's also like, guys, you probably could have cut this off at the head if you had sounded more sirens about this earlier, you know? So I again, I'm not blaming anyone, but it's also like,
I can see
it wasn't handled the best. And again, we don't expect that. So anyway, all this to say, The Con is a good album, and it's a shame that people are getting conned by the people that wrote Fegan, by people pretending to be the people that wrote The Con.
Yeah, it's true. I love this album a lot. Let us know what you think of Tegan and Sara's The Con. And let us know what you think about that documentary, although we already know how most people probably feel about it, because it's a
sorry we spoiled it.
Documentary.
You can't spoil real life, man.
It's just a fact. This is what it is. So, but yeah, I like it. Tegan and Sara. Canada.
I'm going to continue to think about this documentary. I'm probably not going to continue to think about this album. So.
Well, I guess the documentary did do something right.
That's the difference between a musician and a filmmaker.
Oof.
If I were to make an investigative documentary, it'd be like a 10-year process. None of this like, oh, look at the time. It's done.
Hulu needs this in at 5 p.m. Yeah. We didn't solve anything. Doesn't matter. Export.
It's not even like an hour and a half, I don't think.
No, it's pretty short. Yeah.
So, Jordan, let me just end this podcast by saying that if you had your identity stolen and someone was pretending to be you, I probably would fall for it, because who the hell would want to pretend to be Jordan Randall or me if the situation was flipped, you know?
Okay.
It is a big difference.
I didn't know that's where you were going with that, but okay.
That's public. We're not public figures in that way. No. So, you know, I would probably...
We talk a lot, though. You wouldn't know that that somebody else was me.
But if someone... And we've also talked with the Animal Collective guys enough that if they specifically were being impersonated, we'd probably be able to tell pretty quickly.
Yeah, it'd be pretty easy.
That's the benefit of having a blue check mark. You don't have no blue check mark in your email.
No, you don't. And especially not on MySpace.
So really, let's wrap this episode up by saying, fuck MySpace. We're glad it's dead, because it only ever brought evil to the world. Not unlike Facebook. Facebook to a much larger degree, but in this specific context.
It was the precursor.
Yeah. MySpace.con.
Oh.
Yeah.
Love that. That's great.
I don't. I'm sorry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time for Michael Clayton.